housekeeping. In the house we have some security personnel, and they're identified with RBG bandanas on their arms. So, and we also ask for the crowd to be security conscious ourselves. So if you see anything suspicious or any kind of suspicious activity, you can alert one of the security personnel to one there, and the other two at the back also. Okay. So, we're all here today to hear Brother Omali Yeshitela, Chairman Omali Yeshitela present. Chairman in 1992 founded the African People's Socialist Party, who fights for the 1972. Get my date. 1972 founded the African People's Socialist Party, which is a revolutionary organisation fighting for total liberation of Africa and unification of African children all around the world. Founded the Burning Spear newspaper, which is the longest running revolutionary newspaper to date, still circulating today. And Chairman has been a tireless activist for the past 40 years, fighting for the rights of African people around the world. So I know you've all been patiently waiting to hear him, so I'd just like to introduce Omali Yeshitela to everybody.
Thank you. As she said, my name is Omali Yeshitela. I'm chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, and over the last several months, I've been involved in a tour to promote this book, Omali Yeshitela Speaks. But my travel to promote the book throughout the United States and throughout Europe, the African communities throughout Europe. I'll be traveling to South Africa in April as well, and then in May I'll be in West Africa. But the basis of my travel to promote the book is not some kind of activity as a writer or as an author. I'm a revolutionary, and a long time ago have come to the conclusion that African people, black people, ourselves cannot receive anything akin to justice or freedom or anything like that in this country, that we're going to have to take our struggle to an entirely different level. The book is simply a number of speeches and articles and interviews that I've done over the last 3 years. It is a part of what we call the contest of ideas that we are involved in. We feel like that our people here and around the world are involved in a war of ideas, a contest of ideas, and that our ability to participate in the struggle of ideas is critical to the question of winning our freedom. But we also believe that in order to engage in this battle, this critical struggle around ideas, that we must be able to understand some things about our history and the history of, in many ways, the history of the modern world, and how to perceive this. And we also have to understand some things about the context today within which the struggle that we're involved in is occurring. Everybody has to be aware that right now the whole world system is experiencing a crisis of great proportions. All you got to do is look at the newspapers or your television any day. You see criminal activity by this government in terms of what it's doing to poor people in Afghanistan, in Iraq. You see the U.S. government attempting to overthrow the government of Venezuela, continues to strangle Cuba. It is, through the Bush administration, made a declaration of what it characterizes as a strategic defense plan that is comprised of 3 elements. One that recognizes that the United States is the most powerful country in the world today, and that it has an obligation to remain the most powerful country in the world today, and to prohibit any force, any country, anywhere on earth from ever being able to challenge its hegemony of the world. 2, that if it sees or recognizes any force in the world that appears able to challenge its hegemony, its superior position in the world, that it would attack it. And 3, not only would it attack it, but it would attack it unilaterally, that is to say, whether any other force in the world agreed with it or not. This was a public statement. This was a public declaration of the so-called strategic defense plan of the United States. And that's how the U.S. government admits it recognizes the world and itself as being a supreme power. 2, that it would prohibit any other force on earth from ever approximating the kind of power and strength that the U.S. has. And if anyone looked like it was doing that, then it would attack it unilaterally. So that was the pronounced strategic defense plan of the United States government. And we need to understand some things about what that means, why that happened. And I'm saying more than anything that it represents a crisis of the whole world system. This crisis has made itself manifest in 1,000 different ways. One, of course, the war. The other thing is the contradictions between the imperial white powers of the world around the war, with France and Germany appearing to go one direction around this question, while the U.S. appears to go in another direction, with England breaking with the rest of Europe and functioning, as they said, in England itself as a lapdog for U.S. In fact, they used to call Tony Blair Bush's poodle. So he had spoken so seriously with the rest of Europe and had embraced the United States government's attack and war on the people of Iraq. This is obvious kind of crisis that we are looking at, and people are struggling to try to understand this crisis, and we, it seems to me, have to understand our situation in the world within a context of an obviously existing crisis. What does it mean? Now, since childhood, I have been burdened, was burdened, just like every African child, certainly of my generation, and then subsequent to that I'm convinced, with looking out at the world, and everywhere I looked in the world, I saw people who looked like me, who were poor, people who looked like me, who had violence imposed on their lives, everywhere faced with violence, and faced with ignorance imposed on their lives. It didn't matter. All over the world, that's what we saw. And on the one hand. The other hand, everywhere we looked in the world, we saw white people who were not poor. They were just the opposite. I'm not talking about the 6 people that everybody here knows lives in Appalachians who might be hard off. I'm talking about the general condition of existence. White people lived well, and the rest of us lived poorly. And like everybody, I had to have an explanation for this. I had to know why was it that people like me, in fact, so badly that we found ourselves being ashamed of other Africans who we would see around the world because of the obvious poverty and despair that they were mired in. And so the explanation that we were all given for this reality is that Africans are poor. Black people like us are poor because we are less civilized than white people, and because, unlike white people, we are not thrifty. We don't save our money. And this is a thread of discussion that you can hear even today, that somehow we have not developed to the extent that white people have developed, and somehow we are just do not husband our resources. We are not thrifty, etc. That's the line that you hear day in and day out. I mean, it's a hell of a burden for a youngster to be carrying around, trying to understand the world, and being faced with this. And so what it means is, like Malcolm X would say, that it had to loving your enemies and hating your friends. You found yourself all the time trying to emulate the oppressor in order to find your freedom. Because if we were in our condition because of a lack of civilization, and of course white people were the template for what civilization and civilized behavior was supposed to be about, then we, to become civilized, had to become more and like white people. That had to be our goal. That was the way that you become free, by being more and more like white people. What a burden this was. And so that's what you will find all around us. Those of us who were most educated prided themselves in the fact that they were more unlike the rest of us. And they were struggling to achieve this status that was more akin to what white people are. But the fact is that if we had an opportunity to break away from just this fantasy and explore reality, we came up to another understanding. And it was important for us to come to another understanding, because I remember in my lifetime actually telling a white person that I was glad that slavery had happened, because it took me out of the jungles and savagery of Africa and brought me here to this place. And that's the only conclusion that you could come to if you were informed that we were all in the conditions that we're in because we were less civilized, and white people became the template of what civilization was.